with a heart of gold and somebody who is probably one of the best leaders I've ever come in contact with. It's Jo Burston. We are talking tonight, me from Melbourne, her from Sydney, and we're looking forward to diving into a whole range of different conversations so that we can help you understand how we, and in particular how Jo goes about balancing being a leader and how to do wellness well so that you can continue being a good leader over time. So Jo, thanks for joining us. I'm so thrilled to see you.
Lovely to see you as well, Phil. It's been way too long, and I very much hope that you don't get caught up in Melbourne and you find your way home to your family tomorrow.
I am looking forward to it. And for those who aren't across what's happening in Victoria right now, there is a minor outbreak of COVID that's been discovered, and the cases seem to be escalating relatively rapidly here. So I'm on a 6 a.m. flight back to Sydney tomorrow. Looking forward to being back in the state. But Jo, we're here to talk tonight about you and how you've managed over many, many years to juggle and integrate this idea of being well, managing the ebbs and flows of building companies and movements. And, you know, as I mentioned before, Job Capital, a successful enterprise in its own right. And we got to know each other through Inspiring Rare Birds, which is all about empowering women entrepreneurship. So let's kick off with sort of your backstory for people that don't understand and know where you've come from. If we were meeting for the first time and you had sort of 5 minutes to tell me about sort of who is Jo Burston, what would you say?
I'd say I'm an accidental entrepreneur at the forefront of all of that. I grew up in a very working class family in southwest Sydney called Revesby Heights. My father was a fireman and my mother was a bank teller, so I had no business being an entrepreneur. Didn't even know what one was at that point, to be honest. And to cut a very, very long story short, which I know you've heard this story 100 times, Phil, but I was very fortunate to, in my course of being the managing director of a company, fly to Melbourne to meet a potential client who 6 weeks after our first meeting became my first investor, my mentor of 16 years now, and my business partner. So it was serendipity at its best. I did something very cheeky when he asked me to sit anywhere I wanted in his room. I turned and walked around his side of the desk and sat in his chair and said, I'm going to sit here one day, so why don't I start now? And that was really a moment of exactly that. We both laughed. He could see I wasn't taking myself too seriously, but I backed myself. And that, 15 minutes I had with him turned into a few hours. And of course, like I said, 6 weeks later, we were sitting in the restaurant with the back of an envelope, pretty much, or back of a napkin, drew up the terms of how we were going to work together. And we built Job Capital together for the first 2.5 years, almost 3 years. And at that point, I was getting fairly restless to be the leader of the business. He's a very charismatic and strong leader, serial entrepreneur in his own right. But I wanted to be the Pied Piper in my company, not him. So I thought, well, the way I can do that is to strike a deal where he retains himself as my mentor and I get all of his knowledge and I buy him out of his share of the business, which was majority shareholding at the time. So we agreed on some numbers and I got there and continued to fly from there, very much with that person still in my corner helping me.
And it's funny, isn't it? Because that's the beginning of what has become, quite a powerful business. Tell us about Job Capital. What does it do day by day?
Its business is to facilitate 482 visas for those incoming from offshore working in skilled professions or those already in Australia who are transferring from one company to another. We have a full salary packaging suite and a full outsourced payroll suite for small to medium-sized companies as well. During COVID, I thought the whole thing would crash to the floor, and exactly the opposite happened. We went bananas, and that was because foreign nationals that had skills working in Australia were quickly picked up, secured into their jobs, and they actually just didn't want to go home. So you never know who's going to be the winners and losers in this game that we're in at the moment. And so fortunately, we grew through that period. And then I guess to give you a bit of background on Inspiring Rare Birds, that came around about 6 years ago, and I was very intrigued and interested about where the women entrepreneurs were and where the women were in technology. And you've got to remember, 6 years ago, lots happened in that time. Lots more groups have popped up, lots more organisations, which I think is terrific. It was around the time that Turnbull was in government, and entrepreneurship was only then just becoming breakfast table conversation, wasn't it? Until then, it wasn't even on the table at home.
Yep.
So I had an experience where I won the PSC Foundation Award for my contribution to technology and innovation mid-career. Stop on a stage in Parliament House in New South Wales on Macquarie Street, and looked around the room and thought, where are all the women? Where are the women technologists? Where are the women entrepreneurs? And it was full of politicians and academics and industry captains. And I was really just so shocked that there wasn't enough women being represented in the room. So I did something quite bold, and I took a film crew to my old school in Revesby South Public School and Picnic Point High School. And I interviewed about 30 women between the ages of 8 and 17. And in particular, amongst the questions I asked them about who they wanted to become as they grew, I asked them what an entrepreneur was. And to my horror, but the reality was that they thought it was a guy or a man who had a business. So that was my little aha moment for starting that organisation, and for it to become a very socially driven, impact and purposeful company that I wanted to, I guess, make women role models, make women who were in science and in entrepreneurship and in STEM and in corporate and in leadership and partnership role models, so that other women and other younger women could look to them and say, if she can, I can. And of course, that was the title of my second book.
It's interesting as well. So we both love, a good hustle, right? We love sort of getting after it and working out how we close the deals. And
Yes.
we met through, I now think it was serendipity, but it was probably meant to be, two.
We're going to meet at some point, I think.
Yeah, that's right. I think, two companies ago, I had this realization that my team was very heavily stacked male. We were developing software for essentially men and women, and I just had this sneaking suspicion that we were going to get it wrong, entirely wrong on the women's side. I remember sort of finding you on LinkedIn, asking if we could have a conversation. You responded ridiculously quickly. I end up in your office, you talking to me about, or answering the question, where would I go and find to try and hire women software engineers? And I think your response was, so they don't exist. Do you want me to try and help create where they can start to flourish? And the immediate answer was yes. And the rest is kind of history from that.
Yes.
And so, shameless plug for Inspiring Rare Birds as an ambassador and a mentor there. It's a fabulous organization. And if you're looking if you're a woman looking for support in business mentoring and coaching, you should be checking out Inspiring Rare Birds. Google that straight away. In fact, we'll put a link into the chat box. But Jo, we have supported each other through that process, both at Rare Birds and Job Capital and me at various companies, because I think the thing that's over romanticized about entrepreneurship is that it's all T-shirts and pictures and fun, interesting stuff, and it's all product, and it's always usually pretty good. But obviously, there's a very different side to it that a lot of people don't end up seeing, and those that do, can sort of bite them, and they don't want to come back to it sometimes. But you've done a stellar job of managing the ebbs and flows of much of those journeys, and you've seen it 100 times or 1,000 times before. Let's sort of talk about, and the blog post you published just in the last couple of days about how you deal with the balance of wellness and how you sort of integrate that into your life and make decisions. In particular, I love the idea about how you ascribe, the same value to time that you do to wellness. So can you just give us a bit more of an idea around how you arrived at that, some of maybe the circumstances that led you to the idea that it is actually as important as time?
I learned this all the hard way, Phil. There was no silver bullet. I learned it by making the most disastrous mistakes with my energy and with my time and with the wrong people. And I think it was those reflective moments where I thought, I'm never going to put myself in this position again, that gave me the learnings to move forward. I think as an entrepreneur, And as a serial entrepreneur, there's a factor of resilience that we have because of all these mistakes that we've made. And I kind of, to give an analogy, I think it's like a woman wearing a brand new pair of, stilettos that hurt like hell, right? But you keep wearing them until they feel all right and they get comfortable, and you wear them in and they get a bit more tailored to your foot. But the back of your heel, you end up with a big callus. And I think that's what resilience is like. So over the years, we've had all types of pain as entrepreneurs, whether it be financial or legal or people pain or losing money pain or things falling over pain. And I think every single one of those has given me a life lesson of some kind. I think my first one came when I started Job Capital, and I was with someone in business that was entirely beyond my pace as a person, and that made me first of all run faster and think faster. And over a period of time, my mental aptitude to thinking on the spot and thinking while I was running and doing deals on the run, and that became stronger and stronger. But as a result of that as well, I was exhausting myself. And I think it was so I started the business in 2006, and it was in 2012 I had my first meltdown, and that was a really physical meltdown where I was just simply out of gas. We'd spent 5 or 6 years building this company, running like crazy. There was never a marathon. It was a sprint every single day. Every moment was a sprint. And, at that stage, look, to be honest, I was much younger and I did have the vitality to do that then. But it got to a point, I remember leaving my apartment. I was living in the middle of the city. I think you probably went to this one. And I walked out of the door and my feet felt like I had cement shoes on. And I'm like, oh, wow. I was so exhausted. And it wasn't just because of the work. I was doing functions. I was out drinking wine. I was having a social life, like the business was flying. But in the background, my physical well-being was suffering for it. And I remember calling my mum. I said to her, I'm not very well. I said, I'll call you when I get out of bed. And I got out of bed a week later, pretty much. And I knew that was bad. I knew I had to think about what I'm going to do with that to have sustainability in what I was doing, because it was, like I think the Dalai Lama says something like, we go to work hard to earn money so that when we work hard and get sick, we can pay to get better. So there's there's this vicious cycle that we've got to start thinking about, like, why are we doing this so hard? For what reason? So we can be wealthy to look after our health because we're sick. And so I think at that point, I kind of started thinking about I had to pare my tree back a little bit. I had to remove people off the tree and keep the ones that were really important to me. And that's when I started to think about, who do I need around me to make sure that, they say you're the sum of the 5 people of the company that you keep. So who are those main 5 people I need to surround myself with? And one of the things I realized was I needed people with a very positive, strong energy vibe in them. Not because I wanted to suck it out of them, because if I had that around me, it would help me rejuvenate and I could give it back as a result. And I'm a complete introvert by nature. So I need to go away and be on my own and not have noise and just sit still to rejuvenate. I can't be around loud things and loud people to rejuvenate. So that was my first aha moment. And I started to think more and more about, what does my energy mean? And it is absolutely finite. And I worked out this stupid system, which I think kind of worked for me some way, where I realized that I have 100 points of energy every day. And I have only 100 points to spend every day. So if I'm spending 105, that means something's going to break or something's not going to go right. But if I can spend 95, I've still got a little bit left to do something unplanned or unusual. And, I'm pretty regimented with my time. So I worked out that I can only do so much in a day. And by not being honest about that and not being truthful to it, authentic to it, I would make bad decisions because I was tired and I was irritable and I was really actually not a nice person to be around at times, and probably took things out on the people around me, including my staff, that were unwarranted at the time. So there was this whole ripple effect and knock-on effect of doing things while I was tired and making decisions while I was tired. So that was the first part of me kind of realizing that if I don't stop the pattern I'm in, something bad's going to happen to me. And the other realization is that I'm not a marathon runner. I'm a sprinter. So I have to sprint and then stop and then sprint and then stop. So people say, you know, business is a marathon. It's not for me. It's a series of little sprints.
I think my team would probably think the same thing about me, to be honest. I think it's interesting when you talked about the idea of sort of having that sort of week in bed. And then one of the questions we received in the drop-in earlier today was, you know, if I'm already burnt out, how do I recover? And that's, you know, can you tell me a little bit about how you went through that sort of that path out of that? Because it's obviously one of those things where, you know, at some point your brain may reset and it becomes, okay, I'll be good. I'll work through this. It's one foot in front of the other. But can you describe a bit about that experience for you?
I think I'm just trying to relive it, but when it happened, Phil, and like your listener is saying, I'm already burnt out. First of all, you have awareness of it, which is great. You're self-aware that that's actually going on in your world and your life.
Yeah.
You're probably self-aware of some of the reactions and responses from people around you that are not normal to how they would normally respond to you when you're well, or when you're not tired, or when you're not burnt out. But the answers lie in your intuition. And your body tells you what to do. It tells you when you don't want visitors. It tells you when you need to sleep more. Yep. It tells you when you need to eat green food. So one of the things, and I know that, you know, over the last 12 months, not through COVID, but other reasons, I also had some challenges in my world. And I really digged deep into my intuition. And, you know, I would have JOMO. It's the joy of missing out, not the fear of And I would often say no to social events or things that I knew I didn't have the energy to use on. And that could have meant, I guess, and back in 2012, same, it meant that I was preserving my energy. And as we know, when you sleep is when you heal and when your body fixes itself. So I don't feel guilty when I sleep a lot. I don't feel guilty for having a nap in the afternoon if I feel like it. And I don't feel guilty for sometimes, even during the week, not waking up to an alarm. I think it's an absolute luxury in life to be able to have these little pleasures every day. So, and then the other part of it is you have to do something that brings you joy every single day. And it doesn't matter whether it's eating a piece of toast with Vegemite on it, if that's your joy, or it's playing with the dog, or it's whatever it is, go for a walk and around the block, you know, but do something that brings you great joy every single day, because that manifests and it builds on itself.
Yeah, isn't it true? I mean, the whole idea about paying yourself first so you can be better for other people, I think is super underestimated and known around a whole bunch of different fronts. And I guess if we take that idea, you know, as the leader, as the founder, as the CEO, you can make decisions about that because typically your team will be trying to follow you at the pace that you're setting. So it's really important to be mindful of that. But what would you suggest? This is another question that came for the drop-in. What would you suggest is an interesting way for a team member to have a conversation with you as the boss, where it's, look, I'm feeling under the gun. I'm feeling sort of stressed. I feel as I'm on the way to burnout, without suggesting that I'm not up to the job, because I think I am. It's just that I've been trying to keep up and that's not working as well as I thought it would. What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are, in the early days, I probably would have fired you, but I wouldn't do that today. I'm a different leader, because I've learned that great people can run out of energy. You know, great minds can run out of energy. And so I think the early Jo, who was the climbing the top of Everest at 1,000,000 miles an hour was a very different person from a compassionate and empathetic perspective. I think the person I grew into as a leader dramatically changed when I realized that my greatest asset not only is my health, but the people I surround myself with. And that includes the people that work with me.
Yeah.
And I guess you've probably seen over the years my authenticity as a leader. You know, I always call things how they are, and I'm not afraid to say, I made a mistake, or I did that the wrong way, or you've done it a better way, or how can you help me? So I think having that leadership quality for empathy and compassion is really important. So that individual staff member, that team member that you walk beside every day, I walk in front of them to protect them, I walk behind them to promote them, and I walk beside them the rest of the time. And if I can allow them to feel that I'm approachable and authentic in who I am, then that gives them permission to do the same with who they are. And that has happened to me over a course of years, where I've had people that I just can't cope. I'm not doing that well. It could be something that's going on at home. It could be, for an example, I've had in the past someone who's had a very ill partner at home, who's had, you know, and when you look at it from a leader's perspective, you should see the warning signals before that person comes to you anyway. And that's in the format of, you can see perhaps changes in their work.
Yep.
Their attendance might change, or when you're at your weekly meetings and we talk about our values and how we're feeling with one word open. You know, if someone says I'm stressed as their one word open for the meeting, then, you know, I'm going to stop the meeting and go, hang on a second, let's talk about this. Are you all right? What's going on here? So I think a great leader should be able to pick up the signals anyway.
Yep.
And particularly a leader who's gone through that themselves. I think maybe for a younger leader, it could be a bit harder with that lack of life experience. And I'm not being, you know, demeaning to anyone younger, but I've found that people management, when they're not well, is so delicate, and but it takes a big heart, and you've got to be empathetic and compassionate straight away. And if someone was to approach me with a problem, you know, about energy, or they're going to burn out, I would feel really bad that I didn't pick it up. Yeah,
I couldn't agree more. And it's funny, Susie, you're right. So important that we you know, wait. Well, we understand this is happening before people get to empty, because it's a really important aspect for leaders to be aware of. And I guess, Jo, we've received another question here, which is along the same lines, which comes from Prashant, where he's sort of noted that, you know, you and I come across a number of founders. We mentor, I don't know how many founders each we would mentor. I think I'm at about 35 or 40 at the moment. You're probably about in the same boat. And we see these behaviors in first-time entrepreneurs or second-time entrepreneurs. And it's usually because we've been there before, and we can see it. And then the real question is, well, how do you help them, you know, avert disaster? So when you sort of see that ambition, which is maybe incorrectly replacing the need to be sort of self-caring of yourself, so you've got that sustainability, what are some of the things that you offer as those circuit breakers so that they can actually take action to stave off that disaster?
This is going to be an interesting answer, because there's two ways I deal with it depending on the person. Sometimes they need tough love.
Yep.
And sometimes I just have to say, toughen up. This is going to be a hard journey. This is going to be really difficult. You're going to make a lot of mistakes. You're probably going to cry a fair bit. You might have a couple of tantrums. You probably have a fight with someone during the journey. You might have a fallout with an employee, but all these things, please expect them to happen, because they're on the roadmap. They're going to happen at some point. I don't know any entrepreneur that hasn't gone through building a great business that hasn't eaten glass, or hadn't had a bad fight with someone, or a legal issue, or an HR issue, or, you know, gone home and yelled at their partner because they had a bad day, right? So those things are on your roadmap. And if you accept those things being on your roadmap from when you start the journey, when you start to hit them, you go, oh, yes, I knew this was going to happen. Now, how do I deal with it?
That's right.
How do I do it? How do I use my mentor, my advisor, my coach to do it? Because I knew this was going to happen at some point. And of course, the bigger the businesses become and the more problems you have. So, because the more people you have. So it doesn't go away. There's always something to deal with. And even in my group of companies, I wouldn't say every week, but at least once a month, we've got something that rears its head up and we go, okay, well, this is probably going to happen at some point. How do we deal with it? Or, oh, this has happened before. I know how to deal with this. I know what to do with it. So that's the tough love side of it, which is just know it's going to happen and there's no avoiding it. The second part of it is gear yourself to be ready for this journey. So surrounding yourself with the good people, the right people, is going to make those moments of really deep pain a little bit less hurtful. Amen. And the things that I did in my journey in particular was like Phil at Drop Bio, you've got an advisory board, you're surrounded by a group of people that you could never afford to pay as individual employees, but they want to give their time and their expertise and their brains to the business. I mean, what a gift that is. So building an advisory board is a really, really, really smart way to get the support you need as a founder, particularly in the early days before you're ready to build a formal board. The second thing is I belong to groups like the Entrepreneurs Organisation. I did that for 8 years. And now I'm in Young Presidents Organisation, YPO. I've been in that now for 4 years. And I also have a group of women that I meet up with every month. So I've been fortunate enough to surround myself a little bit by design and by invitation to swim amongst giants and sit on the shoulders of giants in my journey. So losing ego, I guess, and being the little fish in a big pond brings you more answers than being the big fish in the little pond. So I like to swim with the big fish and be the little goldfish.
Yeah, I like that. And it's funny as well, because I think the point that it can be easy for someone to be listening to this conversation and to hear you say that. And of course, you're Jo Burston, you're accomplished, you've got access. And the reality is, in the beginning, none of us have access. So
no.
for all of us, it's about go and find and build those sort of circles of support that you can sort of work on. So just on that point, and again, for everyone watching, thank you again for being here. Please go ahead and ask your questions in the Q&A box there, because we're just over at the halfway point now, and we're going to continue answering questions. Jo, when you think about the voices of experience that you enjoy having in your corner, we talked about advisory boards and the way this can play out. I guess the interesting thing is that, as Jim Collins would say, it's really about having the right people in the right roles at the right time. And it's not as though none of this is set and forget, right? So we're talking about the kinds of people who are great at the very beginning of something versus people who are really good at the medium sort of phases, and then people who are really good at growth and other things. That does change. When you're starting out, if you're somebody who has got an idea and you're trying to build that circle of support, what sort of voices do you want in the room with you, or who are easily accessible to you when you need that kind of support at the very beginning?
In my own experience, it was mentors. Obviously, I hit the jackpot, Phil, by having an investor who was a serial entrepreneur who'd done exits and done M&As and IPOs and all the rest of it in my corner from day one. I mean, I just hit the jackpot with that. So yeah. I was already 50 yards ahead of every other horse in the race when I came out of the barriers. And it was like having a 10-ton gorilla in the corner with me, because I felt very, in a way, a little bit protected, but also had someone who could go into battle as a warrior with me and help me navigate through things that he'd navigated 10, 15 years before. So my first point of call would be find those people that have already walked the track that you're trying to walk yourself, and where you can't see the blind spots in that journey. And I always say, you'd never climb Mount Everest without a Sherpa. So how would you climb your own business without someone supporting you like that? And I think, in my opinion, I love mentors because they take a holistic approach. They're normally out of industry. Good ones are not in your own industry. And they're willing to give you all of themselves so that you can all of yourself grow. And I mean, that's why I built Rare Birds on the back of mentoring, because I had so much success with it. And I put, you know, give the credit to that part of my journey, that person who was in my corner. The second thing is I like to have conversations with people that share experiences over people that give me advice, because advice is has no repercussion for the person giving it to you. But from an experiential perspective, if I said to you, Phil, well, this is what's happened to me, it's all been a disaster, and you said, well, you should do this, or you said, Jo, well, that happened to me, and what I did when it happened to me is X, Y, and Z. That gives me information and tools to put in my box that I can use whenever I want to. I don't have to act on it right now. I can use it later. I can put it in my filing cabinet and use it when I need to. Yep. So imagine if you're sitting in a group of people and sharing a problem or a challenge, and then you get 5 or 6 perspectives from their own experience of what happened in that situation from them. There's so much gold and gold nuggets in that. And that's the reason I joined EO. And that was, you know, like I said, now, oh God, I know 15, 16 years ago I joined, but I had like-minded individuals that were sharing experiences with me. We were all equal in the room. No one was more superior to another, regardless of the size of our businesses, regardless of what our turnover was. And the role was to support each other in every way we could through experiences. And this is not a plug for them, but it did have a big impact on how I made decisions in business, because I was seeing perspective that I couldn't see myself.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because, and there's another comment that's been made here in the chat, where it's one thing to deliver opinion, which can be, you know, pretty tricky to sort of. Very
damaging. It can be very damaging.
And then you've got the idea of sort of offering sort of that experiential advice. And I think the key thing to keep in mind is that all kind of feedback that comes your way is something which is designed with the intent to help. Yes. Even though if it lands incorrectly and it makes you sort of feel, well, actually, are you having a crack at me? Or is it something else that I'm not seeing? And it can put you on a rough footing. You know, when we think about the mentees that we've selected and taken on, you know, for me, it's been, are they excited to learn? Are they coachable, as we would say, right? Are they willing to listen? Are they willing to debate and provide more context? Are they willing to go and actually do the work and, you know, put some of these things into play, and remain, you know, pretty humble throughout? Because I think the thing that people forget, and we've had this conversation many times, is that we often learn more from them than they do from us, which is the irony about the whole situation. So when you're looking for mentees, whether it be to select women to come in as recipients of scholarships for Rare Birds or coming in as the mentee program, what are you looking for beyond that sort of coachability piece? Because obviously it's really important when you're matching a mentor and a mentee, it's got to work really well. Otherwise the whole thing goes nowhere, right?
Yes. We were lucky enough when we were funded by the Prime Minister's Office and Cabinet Office for Women, that's happened with us twice, that the first decision we made was around the demographic of the women. So we made it entirely inclusive, and it was marginal demographic women that were selected. So they were Indigenous, Torres Strait, migrant, refugee, disabled, low socioeconomic background, migrant, refugee, I think I said that, remote, rural and regional. Yep. So all of a sudden you've got this pool of women who are already very different. Then we chose them all different industries. So we wanted to have a spread of industries, whether they were digital enabled or not. You know, they could have been on a farm. And then we looked at their desire to learn, their thirst for learning. Now, you know, when you meet someone who is a student of the process, who just wants to get on with it and knows that you've done this before and they haven't, so they're willing to take your lead. And then is a student for life, is always learning, even outside of that mentoring relationship. And I get really, really delighted and thrilled when people I mentor come back and say, oh, you know, Jo, we talked about that. So I went and did some research and I had a look at this and then I found that, and, you know, this is what I learned as well. So I love those people that will take their own initiative as well as follow the lead in the experience of a mentor.
Yeah, it's interesting as well, because when we think about the mindset that we come at mentoring with, I think there's an old school, I don't know, it's sort of like an idea that a mentoring relationship needs to be a scheduled, fixed sort of time block where you prepare every fortnight, every month, and you come in for a discussion. And what I find really interesting, with my mentees is I'm available all the time if you need me. If I can't get back to you, it'll take me some time, but I'll create a channel for you to get to me whenever you need it, because sometimes there are really hard pressing issues that they've got that really, we just need to be available for.
Yeah, like they're rocking in the corner crying.
Yeah. So I don't want to wait for, the 30th of June until we have a conversation to help you with that. I want you to get out of that situation straight away. So, we've done that with Rare Birds. We've looked at the different formats on that. When we move into the idea of being mindful and in the zone to be that student of the process, is there any tips that you offer the women and the men that you mentor around trying to sort of lock out distraction and be totally into the conversation so they can absorb the bits? Like, how do you, beyond a bit of tough love saying, look, my time is valuable, your time is valuable, let's sort of really spend time together. How do you give tips for people to sort of prepare for that?
First of all, when I get on a call or I meet in person, we'll have a bit of chit chat, and then it will be, okay, are we ready? Are we both ready? Are you clear? Are you present? Are you with me here? And then they might go, oh, Jo, I've got, and I'll say, before we get to that, then give me a one-word open to how you feel right now. And then they might say, anticipated or excited or trepidatious. So I read that word as how they're feeling in this very moment right now.
Yeah.
And from there, I can work out how to manage the conversation. So if they tell me they're excited, I know they've got good news for me. If they say to me, I'm really stressed, something's going on. So, but the first part of that is to get both of us very present and clear. And so I will literally say the words, are you present and clear in this conversation?
I love that.
If they say no, why not? Why not? Let's talk about what's going on. Oh, my brother's just gone to hospital. Oh, dad's really sick. Oh, mum's in a, whatever it is. Or the kids are, like there's all these things. So like giving the person the space then to talk about that and how they feel about it, because they've probably been waiting all week to offload that onto me.
Yeah.
And now they've got the opportunity for the air to come out of the balloon and the bottom to be untied. So you kind of have to let that balloon out and you go, okay, all right, now, how are we now? Are we good? Are we clear, and are we present with each other? So sometimes you've got to use intuition as the mentor and be very patient, because they're not going to go at your pace, and you have to read the pace of the person that you're with. And so being compassionate and empathetic is a big part of it. And you might spend the whole session talking about sick dad, but that's what that person needed today.
It's funny, right? Because I think there's a bit of a centering that can go on, but I think it's also up to the mentee to feel as though they can, you've created the space so they can ask you a question anytime.
Yeah,
right?
and be vulnerable. Be vulnerable.
And just be okay that you don't know it all, because I can tell you, given our cumulative, what are we between us, like 12 companies in between us, like we still don't know everything, and we're still learning and making mistakes just about every single day, as I'm sure my team would attest. So Jo, we have seen a lot together. We sort of modulate the ebbs and flows of what's going on, but every so often there is something that catches us off guard, right? And it can be a massive smack in the face, or it can be something so unexpected where you just got to go and take a minute and go for a walk and just go, I can't believe that just happened, without making the rest of the team go, are they okay? How do you deal with those situations, which I know can come from time to time? They probably happen less frequently now, but I know they still happen because we're all human and life comes at us. How do you deal with those things so that you can ensure that the people around you can continue functioning, particularly when the team is running hard?
Yeah, I don't think they always happen less frequently. I think that the emotional effect they have on me now is less. So I think if you think about, Phil, when you started out, the things that would get on your goat and roll you up, now you probably wouldn't even care about it for 2 seconds.
Correct.
So that's that growing of resilience and experience. So when things do happen that are quite big, and I've had a few of them lately, my first thoughts are to take care of myself first. Where is my energy at? Where am I at individually, personally? If I'm tired, don't respond. Don't write that email. Don't pick up the phone. Don't take that phone call. Just be very pleasant and courteous to the person, and maybe say something like, and if it's not a person, it's a thing, it's a process thing. I'm going to just go home and have a nice meal, and I'm going to pick this up in the morning.
Yep.
Because when I do pick it up in the morning, I'm really clear, I'm fresh, and I can make better decisions.
Yep.
Sometimes moving myself completely out of the environment and I mean, that has happened for a long time because we're not in offices anymore, right? We don't have to walk around the block because we can take our dogs for a walk, which is even better. And it means that we still have to remove ourselves from the environment to get perspective. And you would know from your own experience that when you do that, I could be walking down the beach on Sunday afternoon after I've had a cocktail and lunch with friends, and the answer comes to me. And it's because I'm relaxed and I'm out of environment.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've just had a friend join me. Sorry for that barking.
Oh, that's all right.
Working from
like four-legged friends.
Yeah, and I can see actually someone who's jumped up in the chat menu here. Sarah Collingwood, who is a dear friend to both of us, who we all met through Inspiring Red Birds. Great to have you.
Hello, Sarah.
Thanks for joining us. I am interested to ask you, Jo, before we get to any other questions that people have got, let's imagine you're writing a letter to your 20-year-old self. What does that letter say?
You are enough, and you'll become more as you grow and become wiser. Don't waste the minutes on the people that don't matter. Make the mistakes, but don't beat yourself up when you make them. Unless you make the same one twice, that's a bit of a no-no. You will become the 5 people that you hang out with.
So important. Yeah.
Your intuition and your gut instinct is going to always be right. And there'll be times that you will go through your life and try and have a battle with it, and you will fight it, but it will always win and it will always be right. So when you get to that point, put down the weapons and just listen to it. I also think when it comes to business, my philosophy is, and this could be wrong, you have to be all in. You have to be all in, and it's boots and all in to get to a successful place in business. Make sure you look after your parents if they've been really good to you, and make sure you look after them for the rest of their lives, because they gave you a gift, and that is the reason that you're standing there today. And pare your tree back often. So what I've done over the years is I prune the tree back really hard, and I leave the people on it that I want to have relationships with. The ones I don't want to have relationships with, I lovingly detach from them and move away from their space. And that's been a really amazing exercise to do. I've done that probably for about 10 years now, I think. And it reminds me that I should be around people that share my values. And it reminds me that I should be around people that lift me up and make me a better version of myself. The last thing I'd say is the only person you need to compete with in your entire world is you and your ego, and make sure that doesn't turn into a brawl.
It's a pretty compelling letter. I think most of us would like to receive a letter like that at some point. And
remember, I had to learn all those lessons.
That's it. It's one of those things where I think every time that we catch up, it's those values and that kind of set of lessons are lived very, very frequently. It's just such a real pleasure have that with you. Look, I'm wondering, you know, if somebody wanted to become involved in inspiring rare birds, whether it be as a mentor, as a mentee, as a supporter generally, where are people going to learn more about that?
Go to our website, inspiringrarebirds.com. And I know after this session, there's going to be some links that are going to be shot around to you as well. There's options to be a mentor. So don't discount yourself and think, I haven't done that before. I don't really know if I'd be good at it. Let us help you decide that, because it's amazing the knowledge that people are sitting on, the mountains of knowledge they're sitting on without them even realizing how to tap into it.
So true.
And it's not until we match those mentors with someone, and the matching process, as you know, is quite scientific, but a long process. We try and really, the engagement has to be good, so we have to get that matching right. And when we do that matching, most of the time we get it really right, and the mentor thrives because they're enjoying sharing this knowledge that they're sitting on. They're enjoying watching someone grow that they're helping. So don't discount the fact that you'd probably be a great mentor even if you've never done it before. With mentees, there's two streams. The first one is for business owners. So it could be an SME owner or owner of an entrepreneurial venture. Even if you have a male business partner, you can still join the program, but it would only be for you, the single person. And then we go about finding an incredible mentor who's probably been an entrepreneur in their own time to help you through the next phase of growth or wherever you want to go. And obviously with COVID, you could be just getting out of a ditch right now. Sorry, hang on a second. The second thing is, the third stream is our corporate stream. And that is that for women who identify themselves as emerging leaders and emerging talent in corporate organizations. So the corporates sometimes pay for these programs. So they might put a cohort of 20 or 30 women through the program, because the outcome that they want is to attract, retain, develop and promote women within their businesses. And PwC is a fabulous case study that we've been working with for a few years now. Or if you're an individual, you may wish to join the program as an emerging female leader. And we can help you then go through the process of that leadership pathway and journey with the right person in your corner. And that would be a corporate or an executive leader that's been there and done that before. And like I said, we don't put people in the same industry together. So to give greater perspective, you know, perhaps someone in the media industry would be matched with someone in the finance industry. So they're never in the same industry. It stops talk, it stops the jargon, it stops us talking about the people that we know, and it focuses on the objectives that we're trying to achieve. Hang on, so
we have dogs on both sides of this equation. You know, it's interesting, Jo, what you just mentioned there is, and I'll go back to the example, Sarah Collingwood, who's joined us tonight. We met, her and I met through you at Inspiring Red Birds. What we ended up happening was quite miraculous. We ended up in a situation where we've become excellent friends. Our families have spent time together. She is one of Australia's leading wine leaders across the board, and creates an amazing set of products. Just in case you're wondering, you like wine, fourwindsvineyard.com.au, please check it out. And there's a plug, Sarah, because it's an extraordinary product. And the thing is that there has been a friendship that has been born, and whether she thinks that this is true or not, you know, I learn probably a lot more from her than I think she probably learns from me. And it's gone well beyond our original 1 year sort of engagement. I think we still catch up every fortnight for years since. So it does go I'm
really pleased to hear that, because there's a ripple effect that happens. And you know, we strongly encourage the mentees and the mentors to stay in each other's world. Like, if you start this beautiful journey together, you don't have to say goodbye at the end of it. But you know, you can't have Phil all to yourself either. We've got to give him to someone else to have a go as well. And you know what, the lovely thing is that Sarah had such a wonderful experience in the program. We arranged a cohort for women in wine, and so that was through her initiative. And you know, that group of women are also now experiencing the program. So there is this massive ripple effect. And the work that you did then with Sarah, that has gone on to now affect people that you've never met. And that's a real gift and legacy of mentoring.
It's very, very cool. I think, there were some questions that we didn't get to tonight, and we're going to close the session out because I know that people want to get back into their evening. But the questions that did come up, which we didn't get to, were things like, how do I mentor in my local area? This has really been a demand-driven thing, I think, from Rare Birds, where if there is a locale that isn't serviced at the moment, it's about reaching out to Rare Birds and saying, well, can we? And the answer is, well, usually yes. So
we've got people from southeast Tasmania to northwest Western Australia and Karratha being mentored, and everywhere in between. So the geographic location is completely irrelevant. If you've got desire and the need, the thing is that it's about finding